So a few months ago, I got myself a Bambu Lab P2S and I started getting into 3D printing. And in that time, I've been using it to make little functional accessories to solve everyday issues that I run into. So stuff like stands and holders and organizational things, but also a few camera accessories as well. And I want to quickly show you a few of those camera accessories that I've made for myself and talk about them because I gotta be honest, being able to make my own camera gear has been kind of a wild experience. Also, I do want to mention this video is not sponsored by anyone. I bought the printer and absolutely everything related to it, like accessories and filament and that sort of stuff, with my own money. I did some research and it just seemed like a good plug and play option for someone like myself who had no 3D printing experience at that point, because there's a platform that's called Maker World, which is made by the same people who make the printer, where you can find a ton of community-made models to download and to print for free. And all of the settings related to those models are directly baked into them, so you don't have to worry about almost anything, and it's just really beginner-friendly. So it just kind of seemed like it checked all the boxes that I cared about, and I went ahead and I got one. So first thing I want to talk about is something that I didn't technically print for myself, and a friend of mine actually printed it out for me a while back, but because I can now basically reprint this if I ever need to on my own printer, I am just throwing it in here because I think it's kind of cool and I want to show it off. And it is essentially just a little SD card holder. Now, I know this is not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's actually pretty useful because it makes it so I don't have to throw my SD cards into random pockets of my jackets or my jeans or my bags and completely forgetting about them existing forever. This one specifically holds 4 regular sized SD cards, but there are other versions of this thing that can hold more cards and they can hold different sizes of cards. But I think I've been using this one for the past 2 years or so, and it's been working absolutely great. Again, this isn't crazy. It is just a quality of life thing, and I know that you can buy some much more serious ones that have built-in SD card readers and they're waterproof and they're extra protective and whatever, which might be useful if you need that sort of thing, but I don't. So just having something to keep my cards organized is good enough, and it takes barely any time to print and barely costs anything in the material that you would use for it, so I just think that it's kind of cool. Next thing, again, is something that my friend printed for me a while back, but since I can technically reprint it whenever I want, it is in here. And it is this 3D printed cinema housing for a vintage photography lens that I bought ages ago. In here, there is a Helios 44-2, but I personally think it looks and feels much better than the original lens. When I got the lens, I mainly wanted to use it for video, but after trying to do that for a little bit, I quickly realized that it's not the most comfortable for that, especially when you got bigger hands like I do. But someone out there apparently had the same idea, and they designed this housing for it that pretty much solves that issue. Now, like I said, my friend printed out all of the parts that were necessary for this, and I just put them over top of the original lens to get this thing, and it is so much more comfortable to hold, and it makes it much more comfortable to pull focus with it and to adjust the aperture. And I can also throw a follow focus on here if I really wanted to, because it actually has gears on here that would work with that. So it is just all around better for filmmaking. And the cool thing is, while I was looking for a housing for this lens, I found a bunch of other 3D housings for other vintage lenses that all looked really cool. So if you're someone who shoots with a lot of vintage glass, it could be worth it to check out if there are any housing models for the lenses that you own, because this is a huge quality of life improvement. And I know I can technically get something like this, which are old lenses that are professionally rehoused, but that's gonna cost a lot more money. So this is a perfect example of how 3D printing can be exceptionally useful for filmmakers. All right, now I want to also show you something that I have actually 3D printed with my printer, and it is going to be a little bit boring, but you're just going to have to bear with me for a second because it is step-up rings for lens filters. And before you skip ahead or you click away or whatever, just let me explain for a second, all right? I have got a bunch of regular metal step-up rings that I've bought over the years, and they work pretty much fine. Like, they work like you would expect. But anytime when I want to use a big filter with a small lens, I have to stack them on top of each other, and I get this kind of like cone of shame on the front of my lenses, which I always think looks really goofy, but also it just makes the lenses longer and bigger and they take up more space in my bag and stuff. And also, if I want to take off the cone of shame, sometimes half of it is going to come off of the lens, but the other half is going to stay stuck on it, and I'm going to have to sit there messing around with it to take it off, and it's just really, really annoying. So with the 3D printer, I've been able to go ahead and just make single adapters that go straight from the thread size of whatever lens I'm using to the thread size of whatever filter I want to have on it. So instead of having to stack a bunch of adapter rings on top of each other, I just have one, which keeps the footprint of the lens much smaller, and it also doesn't look as stupid. And not only that, but sometimes I might want to adapt a filter to a lens that has a weirdly specific thread size, and there isn't even like a step-up ring for it that I can buy. Like, they don't make that size. So instead, I can just 3D print one in a few minutes. And people out there have already made a bunch of models for different sizes of step-up rings, so I can usually easily find whatever I need to. But even if I can't, on Maker World there are these customizable models where I can put in the thread size of the filter that I'm going to be using, and then the thread size of the lens that I want to use it with, and it generates a custom model for me to download and to print. So again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but all this is just a quality of life improvement. And something like this takes about 30 minutes and around 5 grams of filament, which only ends up costing a few cents, which to me is just really cool. So that's why from now on, I am definitely going to just keep printing out my own adapter rings anytime I need to, because it is a lot quicker, a lot more convenient, and it barely costs any money. One more thing I want to talk about is I recently bought a new camera bag from Tenba, and it is a great bag. Like, I really, really like it so far. But there were a few things about it that kind of bugged me. First of all, there was the strap on the front of the bag that just kept dangling all over the place. So I printed out a clip for it to keep it in place. And I found this model on Maker World that I then adjusted in a site called Tinkercad so that it would fit the strap a little bit better. And also, that same strap came with this metal hook thing that would clip onto the back of the backpack. And it's fine, but I wasn't the biggest fan of that. So I found a model on Maker World for a magnetic clip. And I did have to adjust it a little bit in Tinkercad again because it was meant for round magnets and I only had rectangular ones, but I printed it out that way. I put the magnets in place, I replaced the original clip with the magnetic one, and everything works perfectly. But the final thing I want to show you, at least in this video, is something that you've actually been looking at this entire time so far, and it is that light on the table behind me. So I actually ended up designing and printing my own diffusion dome for a light panel that I've had for years. And I'm not really going to go too deep on this specifically in this video because I am planning on making a separate one about it down the line. But the short version is I bought this light panel like ages ago, a really long time ago. And when I bought it, it came with its own small diffuser that I don't really think did much to make it any softer of a light source. But the thing is, over the years, I've seen other small lights and light panels that have much bigger diffusers that are a lot more useful. So when I got my 3D printer, I was like, I wonder if I can make something like that, but for the panel that I already have. So I looked into what was already out there and I found a model that was kind of similar to what I wanted to make, but it was for a different panel. So I used that as a reference, and then I spent a few days designing and printing out test versions, and eventually I made something that I think works pretty well. But again, I am planning on making like a whole separate video where I talk about why and how I made this, and I'm also going to show some examples of what the results from it look like. So if you're interested in that, it's probably a good reason to subscribe and stick around. But yeah, I've just been having a lot of fun lately with 3D printing in general, and I've been able to come up with solutions to little annoying things in my day-to-day life, but also for various filmmaking and photography and camera gear issues that would have probably taken me a lot more time or money to deal with in the past, or would have at the very least just been a pain in the ass. And instead of relying on stuff that maybe already exists but costs an extortionate amount of money or it would take ages to get delivered, I can go online and look for a fix that someone has already designed, and I can print it out for barely any money and barely any time in my own office at home. And even if there is no specific 3D model that solves my problem, I can at the very least sit down and try to design my own thing, even if it is super simple, and again, come up with a solution to some very, very niche problems. So this is kind of a new little side hobby, side quest storyline thing that I've unlocked, but I have a feeling that it might be really useful long term, so you might occasionally see more videos like this on the channel down the line. Don't worry, I'm not gonna turn this into a 3D printing channel from now on. It's just something that I am kind of excited to explore a little bit more of down the line, and if I come up with something that I think is cool, I'm probably just gonna share it with you, but it's not gonna replace all of the other stuff that I do on the channel. But yeah, I think that's about it for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Actually, by the way, if you're someone who's also been down this whole like rabbit hole of printing out your own camera gear, let me know what you've made, because maybe it's something that I can print out for myself, and then if I also end up liking it, maybe it ends up in a future video or whatever. But yeah, now I'm done.